The air in the lawyer's office is thick with the scent of stale coffee and old paper, but all I smell is the metallic tang of fear. It coats my tongue, makes my stomach churn. My hands are shaking, tracing the cool edges of the mahogany desk. Across from me, Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, a man whose face usually holds the serene detachment of someone who sees the world through footnotes and case numbers, looks concerned. That single furrow between his brows feels like a canyon opening up in my carefully constructed reality. He slides a document across the desk. A single page. Not thick, not complex, just a summary. A number stares up at me. $3 million. A loan. Taken out 4 months ago. And under borrower name, clear as day, is mine. My full name. My signature. A perfect forgery. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before this moment that feels less like a moment and more like a cliff edge I've suddenly been pushed towards, life was a predictable rhythm. Comfortable. Maybe a little beige around the edges, but secure. We had a house in the suburbs, the kind with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. 2 cars that were paid off, I might add. We took vacations, not extravagant, but nice. A week in the mountains in the fall, a beach trip in the summer. My husband, David, worked in finance. Said he was doing well. Stable job, good bonuses. I ran a small online business, selling handmade ceramics. Enough to feel independent, to contribute, but his income was the anchor. He handled the investments, the mortgage, all the big financial stuff. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. We built a life together. We talked about retirement, about maybe buying a small place by the coast someday. We talked about everything, or so I thought. There were no secrets, no red flags, not that I saw. He was attentive, kind, maybe a little distant sometimes with the stress of his job, but who wasn't? Our evenings were quiet, dinner together, watching TV, talking about our days. Normal. That's the word. It was all so relentlessly, comfortingly normal. My biggest worry was whether my kiln firing would crack a new batch of mugs. I wanted peace. I wanted security. I wanted the quiet certainty of knowing my future was safe, built on a foundation of shared effort and mutual respect. I believed I had it. The first hint wasn't even about the loan directly. It was a statement. Addressed to me. A bank I didn't recognize. A corporate account number that wasn't mine. I opened it, confused. It was dense with financial jargon, numbers I didn't understand, transfers I didn't recognize. It mentioned an initial deposit that corresponded exactly to the loan amount I would later discover. It mentioned property addresses. Addresses of commercial buildings. Retail spaces. My confusion curdled into unease. I asked David about it. He was dismissive. Oh, just some investment thing I'm exploring, he said, waving a hand. Business stuff. Don't worry your head about it. I'm using some of our equity, diversification, he smiled, a quick, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I felt a prickle of something I couldn't name. But he handled everything financial. He was finance. Who was I to question? He had an explanation, however vague. I let it go. Or I tried to. The unease lingered, a low hum beneath the surface of our normal life. Then came the registered letter. From a different bank. Demanding payment. Mentioning my name, my social security number, late fees, covenants. This wasn't a vague investment statement. This was a demand. For a huge sum. For a loan I knew nothing about. My hands shook opening it. Reading it felt like the world tilting on its axis. This was real. This was tied to me. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. I confronted him that night. I laid the letter on the kitchen counter, the harsh fluorescent light glinting off the official seal. He came home, tie loosened, briefcase in hand, the picture of the successful, slightly tired husband. He saw the letter. His face went pale. Then, just as quickly, a mask descended. "What is this?" he asked, his voice too steady. I told him I wanted an explanation. I wanted to know why my name was on a loan for $3 million. That's when the performance started. Indignation. Anger. How dare you go through my mail? This is confidential, he blustered, reaching for the letter. I snatched it away. My name, David. On a loan for $3 million. That's not confidential. That's fraud. He switched tactics. The weary sigh. Look, it's complicated. Business investment. A good opportunity came up. I needed to move fast. There were some technical issues with using my name directly. Corporate structure. Offshore something or other. The words tumbled out, a jumble of jargon designed to confuse and overwhelm. He sounded like he was reading from a script. I pushed back. My signature, David. That's not my signature, he faltered for just a second. Then the anger flared again, hotter this time. You think I forged your signature? After everything? After building this life? He was yelling now, his face red. Maybe you should trust your husband for once. You don't understand business. I'm doing this for us. He grabbed the letter again, ripped it in half, threw it in the trash. Drop it, he snarled. Just drop it. I'll handle it. I didn't drop it. How could I? My name was on $3 million of debt. Debt I didn't incur, debt I didn't know about. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. He left a note. Sorry about last night. Stressful time. Let's forget it, forget it? How could I forget financial ruin? I felt a cold dread settle in my bones. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was deception. This was dangerous. My first step was calling the bank. The one the loan was from. I pretended to be him, using the account number from the statement. I asked basic questions, trying to glean information. They were cagey, citing privacy. I escalated. I said I was a co-signer who hadn't received proper documentation. They were apologetic, but still didn't reveal much. They confirmed the loan amount, the date, the property addresses. Those addresses, they felt significant. I looked them up online. They were all commercial spaces in different parts of the city, high-end retail districts. What kind of business investment was this? I tried talking to David again.
Calmer this time.
I asked about the addresses. He gave vague answers about commercial real estate speculation.
It didn't feel right.
Nothing felt right anymore. The air between us was thick with unspoken lies. He started staying late at work, weekends too. He was distant, his phone constantly buzzing, always face down. I felt like a detective in my own home, sifting through crumbs of information, trying to piece together a picture that kept getting uglier. My sleep was fragmented, filled with nightmares of debt collectors and foreclosed homes. My ceramics business felt trivial compared to the mountain of debt looming over me. I was terrified, alone, and utterly lost. I didn't know who to turn to. My friends knew David as the stable, reliable one. My family lived far away. Admitting this felt like admitting I had failed, that my entire life was a lie. The silence in the house became a character of its own. A heavy, suffocating presence. David moved through our home like a ghost, polite but absent. The physical distance between us mirrored the emotional chasm that had opened. I watched him, searching his face for the man I thought I knew. I saw a stranger, someone capable of cold deception. My fear hardened into a cold knot of resolve. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't live under the shadow of a $3 million fraud I didn't commit. I had to find out the truth, the whole truth, no matter how painful. One evening, David left his laptop open. A flicker of hesitation warred with desperation. Was this crossing a line? The line felt long gone, blurred by his own actions. I sat down at the desk, my heart pounding. His email was open. Subject lines jumped out. Loan docs, property purchase, funding update, and then I saw a name repeated in several emails. Sarah, and subject lines like Sarah's boutique, lease agreement, Sarah's vision, meeting with Sarah Ree, store design Sarah. Who was Sarah? And why was David buying property and discussing store design with her, using money borrowed in my name? My fingers trembled on the keyboard. I clicked one of the emails. It was a thread between David and someone named Sarah Jenkins. Casual, familiar language. Discussing locations, renovations, staffing. It wasn't just one store. It was multiple. They were building a chain. A chain of boutiques. For Sarah. I did a quick search for Sarah Jenkins. Social media profiles popped up. A glamorous woman, younger than me. Her profiles hinted at a passion for fashion, a dream of owning her own stores. Recent posts showed her celebrating big new beginnings, exciting ventures, pictures of her with David. Casual photos. Laughing together. Standing close. My breath hitched. They weren't just business partners. The way they looked at each other in some of the photos, it was unmistakable. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The $3 million loan in my name, with my forged signature, wasn't for some abstract business investment or commercial real estate speculation. It was to fund his mistress's dream. To buy her a chain of boutiques. With my financial security. He wasn't just having an affair. He was using my identity, stealing my future, to build a life with someone else. He wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to leave me ruined, destitute, responsible for millions in debt while he rode off into the sunset with his new life, built on my ashes. The pain was so sharp, so deep, it stole the air from my lungs. But beneath the pain, a cold, hard anger began to solidify. This wasn't just betrayal. This was an act of calculated cruelty. He didn't just break my heart. He tried to break me entirely. In that moment, sitting in the quiet house, the laptop screen glowing with their shared secrets, the fear didn't vanish, but it was joined by something new, something steel-like and unforgiving. I wasn't going to be the collateral damage in his sordid midlife crisis. I wasn't going to be the woman left behind with nothing but debt and a broken heart. He tried to bury me financially. I decided I was going to climb out of the grave he dug for me, and I was going to make him watch. I spent the next few days in a blur of quiet investigation. I copied every relevant email thread, downloaded documents, cross-referenced addresses, loan details, and Sarah's online footprint. I built a timeline of their affair intertwined with the loan process and property acquisitions. I learned the names of the holding companies he'd set up, the banks involved, the specific properties. It was meticulous, soul-crushing work, confirming the depths of his deceit with every click. The boutiques weren't just a few stores. It was 4 locations, already undergoing renovations, poised to open soon. His plan was advanced. He likely intended to file for divorce after the businesses were up and running, leaving me to deal with the debt. The thought made me feel physically ill. I knew I couldn't confront him again.
Not yet.
He would destroy the evidence.
He would lawyer up.
I needed help. Real help. I needed someone who understood the intricate dance of finance, fraud, and family law. I needed a shark. I found Mr. Henderson through a discreet referral. He had a reputation for being ruthless and effective in complex financial cases. Sitting in his office, recounting the story felt surreal. Like I was describing someone else's nightmare. I laid out the documents, the timeline, the evidence of the affair, and the forged signature. Mr. Henderson listened, his expression grim. He asked sharp, precise questions. He didn't doubt me. He didn't judge. He saw the case for what it was, blatant, calculated fraud. He confirmed my worst fears. David had used specific legal maneuvers to try and shield himself. The loan was taken out in my name as the primary borrower, likely because my credit score was higher or our combined assets made the bank more comfortable, but the holding companies used to purchase the properties were structured in a way that might have allowed him to claim they were separate business assets, potentially leaving me with the debt while the boutiques were safe with him and Sarah. It was complex, insidious, and designed to leave me financially gutted. It was a sophisticated plan, not an impulsive mistake. That knowledge cut deeper than almost anything else. He put more thought into ruining me than into building a life with me. Mr. Henderson explained the options. Divorce, obviously. But the debt complicated everything. Standard divorce proceedings might divide assets, but they might also divide liabilities, leaving me potentially responsible for a significant portion of that $3 million loan, even if I proved the forgery, depending on state laws and how cunning his lawyers were. He was confident we could prove the forgery and the fraud, but unwinding the financial damage and ensuring I wasn't left holding the bag was the challenge. And then there was the issue of the boutiques. They were the physical manifestation of the betrayal, bought with a fraudulent loan. Could I touch them? Could I claim them? That's when Mr. Henderson introduced the idea that would become my strategy. It wasn't just about proving the forgery. It was about proving the fraudulent intent and tracing the funds directly from the fraudulently obtained loan in my name to the purchase of those specific assets. If we could do that decisively enough, we could potentially petition the court not just for damages or debt relief, but for the imposition of a constructive trust, or argue for unjust enrichment against both David and Sarah, linking the fraud directly to the boutiques they now considered theirs. The goal wasn't just to get rid of the debt. It was to reclaim what was built on my stolen identity. It was audacious. It was risky. But it felt right. It felt like the only way to truly undo the damage and prevent them from profiting from their crime against me. We began to build the case. Quietly, meticulously, gathering more evidence. Subpoenaing bank records, property deeds, business formation documents. Every piece of paper screamed his guilt, his planning, his cold determination to use me as a financial shield. I became obsessed, working with Mr. Henderson, sifting through documents late into the night after David had gone to bed or left for one of his late meetings. I learned about corporate veils, asset tracing, the specific nuances of fraud litigation. It was a crash course in the mechanisms of financial deceit. And the deeper I went, the angrier I became. This wasn't abstract money. This was my future, my security, my peace of mind he was gambling away, giving to someone else. The stress was immense. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. Every time David looked at me, I wondered if he saw the debt he'd put on my head. I played the part of the oblivious wife, waiting, watching, gathering my strength like a coiled spring. It was the hardest performance of my life. Eating dinner with him, making small talk, knowing the truth. It felt like living with a predator. The house, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. The silence wasn't just absence. It was the sound of his secrets echoing in the empty spaces between us. I was constantly on edge, terrified he would discover what I was doing, terrified he would somehow find a way to escape the consequences, terrified I would lose everything. There were moments of despair. Moments when the weight of the $3 million felt crushing, when the complexity of the legal fight seemed insurmountable, when the thought of facing David and Sarah in court made me physically ill. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if his expensive lawyers found a loophole? What if, despite all the evidence, I was still left with the debt? My internal monologue was a constant loop of fear and doubt. But then I would look at the documents, see my name on that loan, see the pictures of him and Sarah, and the anger would surge, burning away the fear. He tried to erase me. I refused to be erased. The legal process moved slowly but relentlessly. Filing the initial suit felt like pulling the pin on a grenade. It was a combined action. Divorce, yes, but primarily a civil suit for fraud, naming both David and Sarah Jenkins, seeking damages and the imposition of a constructive trust on the assets purchased with the fraudulent funds. This was the key. We weren't just asking for money back. We were arguing that the boutiques, bought with money obtained through fraud using my identity, were rightfully mine in a sense, or at least subject to being used to satisfy the fraudulent debt. When David was served, the carefully constructed facade shattered. He called me, screaming. His voice was a raw, animalistic sound I'd never heard before. What the hell did you do? Are you insane? You're suing me and Sarah? For fraud. You're going to ruin everything. He wasn't denying it anymore. He was just furious that I had exposed him, that I had dared to fight back. I stayed calm, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. You took out a $3 million loan using my name, David. You forged my signature. You used that money to buy your mistress a business. What did you think was going to happen? His response was a torrent of abuse, threats, and gaslighting. He accused me of being vindictive, crazy, of trying to destroy him because I was a bitter wife. He threatened to make sure I ended up with nothing. It was chilling to hear the venom in his voice, to realize this was the man I had shared my life with. It confirmed that there was nothing left to save, nothing left to hope for. This was a battle, pure and simple. Sarah's reaction was equally telling. She sent me a series of text messages, furious, entitled, demanding. How dare I interfere with their business, their dream? She called me pathetic, jealous. Her messages confirmed she was fully aware of where the money came from, or at least that David had handled it through complicated channels, and that I was the wife being left behind. She saw me not as a victim of fraud, but as an obstacle to her new life. Her arrogance fueled my resolve even further. The process became a grueling war of attrition. Depositions, subpoenas, motions, countermotions. David and Sarah hired aggressive lawyers who tried to paint me as unstable, greedy, a wife lashing out after discovering an affair. They argued the loan was a legitimate business transaction David was managing, and while he might have made errors in documentation, it wasn't fraud, certainly not involving me intentionally. They tried to distance the loan from the boutique purchases, claiming the funds were mixed, hard to trace directly. They tried to argue that Sarah was an innocent third party who had received a legitimate investment from David. It was a masterclass in deflection and denial. But we had the paper trail. The initial bank statements showing the lump sum deposit corresponding exactly to the loan amount into a holding company account. The subsequent rapid transfers from that account directly to the escrow accounts for the specific boutique properties. Emails between David and Sarah discussing the funding before the loan was secured. Bank records showing my credit history was used to qualify for the loan. Expert analysis confirming the forged signature. We built a fortress of evidence, piece by painstaking piece, demonstrating a clear intent to deceive and a direct line from the fraudulently obtained funds to the acquisition of Sarah's boutiques. The emotional toll was immense. I was constantly drained, oscillating between bursts of cold determination and waves of crushing anxiety. Seeing David and Sarah in court, whispering together, sometimes smirking, felt like a physical assault. They seemed so confident, so untouchable. Was it possible they could get away with it? The thought gnawed at me. My lawyer bills climbed, adding another layer of financial pressure. I had to dip into my meager savings, take out a small loan myself just to cover the legal fees. The irony was not lost on me. Fighting against a fraudulent $3 million loan required me to take on legitimate debt. There was a specific point, during a particularly brutal deposition, where David's lawyer tried to discredit my character, implying I was difficult, controlling, driving David away, that something shifted inside me permanently. His lawyer suggested that David had to resort to alternative financing methods because I was too restrictive with our joint finances. It was a sickening distortion of reality. I looked at David sitting there, letting his lawyer paint this false picture, saying nothing to stop it, and something inside me went cold. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my reputation, my sanity, my very identity that they were trying to dismantle. In that moment, all the fear, all the doubt, all the pain coalesced into a single, sharp point of resolve. I was done being the victim. I was done being defensive. I was going on the offensive. I told Mr. Henderson, we don't just prove the fraud. We connect it directly to the boutiques so tightly that they can't sever the link. The boutiques aren't just assets. They are the fruit of the poison tree. We make sure the court sees them that way. Mr. Henderson, already a formidable lawyer, understood. Our strategy sharpened. We focused relentlessly on tracing the funds, on demonstrating that this specific loan, taken out fraudulently in my name, was the lifeblood that funded these specific businesses. We weren't just seeking monetary judgment. We were arguing for the court to recognize the direct line between the fraud and the assets, and to impose a constructive trust or equitable lien on the boutique properties themselves. This meant arguing that David and Sarah held those properties in trust for me, the true victim of the fraud, to the extent of the fraudulently obtained funds used for their purchase. It was a sophisticated legal argument tailored to the specific circumstances of identity theft and asset tracing. The day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was sterile, quiet, intimidating. David and Sarah were there, sitting with their legal team. They looked confident, perhaps a little tense, but certainly not like people who expected their world to implode. I sat with Mr. Henderson, trying to project calm I didn't feel. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The culmination of months of pain, fear, and relentless work. Mr. Henderson presented our case. He laid out the evidence with precision. The loan documents with my forged signature. The expert analysis confirming the forgery. The bank records showing the money trail. Loan dispersed, deposited into David's holding company account, transferred to property escrow accounts for the 4 boutique locations. The emails detailing David and Sarah's plans for the boutiques, discussing funding timelines that aligned perfectly with a loan disbursement. Sarah's own social media posts celebrating the business venture at the exact time these properties were being acquired. He argued eloquently, detailing the elements of fraud, the deliberate intent to deceive, the use of my identity, and the direct link between the fraudulent act and the specific assets, the boutiques. He explained the legal concept of a constructive trust, arguing that equity demanded that assets acquired through fraud be held for the benefit of the victim. David's lawyers countered, rehashing their arguments about business complexities, mixed funds, and Sarah being an innocent party. Sarah testified, trying to portray herself as a naive entrepreneur who thought David was simply investing his own money. David testified, attempting to downplay the loan, claiming I was aware of his business ventures, minimizing the signature issue as a misunderstanding or expedient necessity due to time pressure. He was smooth, trying to charm the judge, trying to look like a man who maybe cut a corner but wasn't a malicious fraudster. And then it was my turn to testify. I told my story simply, truthfully. The trusting wife, the discovered statement, the forged signature, the lies, the gaslighting, the sickening discovery of the affair, and the real purpose of the loan. I described the fear, the sleepless nights, the feeling of being trapped and helpless. I looked at David, not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating sadness. I described how he had tried to steal not just my money, but my identity, my security, my future. I looked at Sarah, who refused to meet my eyes. I explained how they built their dream on the foundation of my nightmare. The judge listened intently. He asked clarifying questions, sharp and to the point, cutting through the legal jargon to the core of the truth. There was a moment, as I finished testifying and walked back to my seat, when the air in the courtroom felt impossibly still. The judge delivered his ruling. He spoke about the evidence presented, the burden of proof. He addressed the forged signature, finding it clearly proven and undisputed by credible evidence from the defense. He addressed the money trail, noting the clear and direct transfers from the fraudulently obtained funds to the specific property purchases. He addressed the communications between David and Sarah, finding that they demonstrated Sarah's awareness that the funding was tied up in complex, unusual arrangements facilitated by David, and at minimum, she was a beneficiary of his fraudulent actions against me. He found that David had committed a clear and egregious act of fraud against me, using my identity and forging my signature to obtain a loan for his own purposes. And then he delivered the part that blindsided them. He ruled that given the clear evidence tracing the fraudulently obtained funds directly to the purchase of the boutique properties, equity demanded a remedy that went beyond a simple monetary judgment against David. He ruled that a constructive trust was to be imposed on the 4 commercial properties housing Sarah's boutiques. He ordered that the properties were to be legally considered as held for my benefit, to satisfy the debt incurred fraudulently in my name. David let out a strangled cry. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Their lawyers were on their feet immediately, protesting, asking for clarification, arguing against the imposition of the trust. But the judge was firm. The funds were obtained by fraud using my identity. Those funds purchased these assets. Therefore, the assets were tied to the fraud against me. The boutiques, the physical manifestation of their betrayal and my financial ruin, were now legally under my control, to be used to satisfy the $3 million loan debt. They didn't just lose the case. They lost the prize they committed the fraud to obtain. David screamed. He actually screamed. A sound of pure, unadulterated rage and shock. You can't do this. Those are Sarah's businesses. You ruined us. You evil BTCH. He lunged forward, needing to be restrained by his lawyers and a bailiff. Sarah was crying hysterical. They were utterly blindsided. They thought they were safe. They thought I would just get a divorce settlement, maybe a judgment against David that he could try to escape. They never anticipated that the court would directly target the boutiques, the very foundation of their new life, because they were built with money stolen from me. The look on their faces, the sheer disbelief and despair, was chillingly satisfying. He tried to ruin me, to leave me with nothing but debt. Instead, he lost everything he had built with his mistress, and I gained control over the very assets bought with my stolen identity. The aftermath was surreal. The legal victory felt immense, but the emotional landscape was a wasteland. David faced further legal consequences for the fraud, including potential criminal charges and civil penalties. Sarah was left with the public humiliation and the loss of the businesses she had poured her hopes into, businesses now legally mine to manage or sell to cover the debt. The boutiques, symbols of my husband's betrayal, were suddenly my responsibility. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. I wasn't suddenly rich or blissfully happy. I was exhausted, emotionally scarred, and tasked with unwinding a multi-million-dollar mess created by the man I loved. I decided to sell the boutiques. Running them held no appeal. They were tainted. The process was complex, involving appointing administrators, valuing the businesses, finding buyers. It took time. Every step was a reminder of what had happened, of the trust that was broken, the life that was destroyed. But with each step, the weight of the debt began to lift. The proceeds from the sales went directly towards paying off the $3 million loan taken out in my name. It wasn't a clean break. There were still legal costs, the complexities of the divorce, the emotional fallout. But the crushing, immediate threat of being personally liable for millions in fraudulent debt was gone. The assets built on my stolen identity were used to clear the very debt they were meant to leave me with. Justice, in this cold, financial form, had been served. The house was sold. The life we built, the one I thought was real, was dismantled piece by piece. I moved into a small apartment, starting over. It was a quiet, solitary existence for a while. Healing wasn't linear. There were days when the anger returned, days when the sadness was overwhelming, days when the sheer exhaustion of the fight threatened to consume me. But there were also moments of quiet strength, moments when I realized I had survived. He tried to destroy me, and I didn't just survive. I fought back, I exposed the truth, and I reclaimed my future. I learned that trust, once broken, is impossible to mend. I learned that appearances can be deceiving. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is the truth and the courage to wield it, even when you're terrified. The scar remains, a reminder of the betrayal, but also a testament to my resilience. I was broken, but I was not destroyed. I stood in the ruins he created and found the strength to rebuild, this time, entirely on my own terms. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.